be joining. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'll be your panel moderator today. My name is Christopher Yang. In case you don't know me yet, I'm an executive committee member at TCA-LA. In addition to my role here, I'm currently the VP of Engineering at Corporate Travel Management. And for those who are not familiar with TCA, we are one of the largest and most active angel investment groups in the nation. We have invested over 450 companies with a total investment exceeding 250 million. And our portfolio companies have attracted more than 2.1 billion in addition to investment, in additional investment capital. So with more than 450 members across 4 chapters, the TCA really brings diverse industry knowledge and critical business connection to our portfolio companies. And despite COVID, we had a record year last year. In 2020, TCA invested over 60 deals and provide around 20 million in startup funding. As part of our 2021 initiative to provide insight into opportunities available in emerging industries, TCA has been hosting a series of panel discussions, bringing together industry thought leaders, innovators, and capital providers to share their expertise. And tonight, we'll be focusing on health and wellness and discussing what it takes for healthcare startups to be successful in a post-pandemic world. I'm really excited about the group we've got today. So to start off, I would like to go around and have the panelists introduce themselves and maybe tell us where you are located and a little bit about you and what your company does. So Mohan, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, my pleasure. Mohan Nair. I run a company called Emerge. It is a consulting firm and advisory firm focused on transformation and how businesses transform from where they want to be to where they have to be. The last 17 years I spent as Chief Innovation Officer for a $9.8 billion healthcare institution called Cambia Health, headquartered in Portland, Oregon. And I also was running the health plans for a period of 2+ years and ran marketing for that organization as well. So there were various jobs. The only way to describe my career is 3, 3, and 3. I've had 3 corporate roles, of which my last one was just a few months ago. And then 3 startups, of which 2 exits. And then 3 books that I've written, just trying to express my thoughts in the hopes of transforming the world around me. It's good and pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Mohan. Very impressive background. And we also have Nicole joining us tonight.
Hi there. My name is Nicole Dunn, and I am the CEO of a company called Dunn Pellier Media. We do health and wellness PR. I was a former television producer and worked in TV for 15 years and then made a jump over to start my own company when I noticed there was a lack in positive coverage for health and wellness brands. And our first client was Tony Horton from P90X. We took him, made him into the most visible man in fitness, and that was how I got my start. And we've expanded out. We're in Los Angeles. Right now we're working with Walmart, we're working with Side Chef, we're working with Essentia mattresses, and we're working with Les Mills, which is a huge brand, fitness brand from New Zealand, and some other experts and authors as well on the roster. And yeah, we help brands gain visibility and access in the media. We've been very successful on the Doctors, Dr. Oz, Today Show, you name the programs, we've probably done them. MSNBC, Fox, if you're a Foxer, and all that good stuff. So yeah, we're in the world of fitness and health. We just love everything about wellness, and it's a $4.5 trillion industry, and we love it. Thanks,
Nicole. Thanks for the intro. Kunal, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Krunal Patel. I'm engineering director with Chan Zuckerberg Initiative Foundation. I'm part of science team, come from software engineering background. Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is a philanthropy launched by Dr. Priscilla Chan and Mark Zuckerberg. and I'm part of science team. We focus on various programs like meta, infectious disease, single cell biology, and imaging. A lot of this work is not just grant making, but also building scalable, complex software architecture that helps scientific community. Overall, I have about 18 years of experience, out of which last 12 years I've been working in enabling healthcare and life science using various technologies.
Thank you, Cornell. And we have Daniel here tonight as well. Daniel is the founder of one of TCA's portfolio companies. Daniel.
Hi, thanks for having me on. So I'm Daniel Zakowski, founder and CEO of Ready Set Food. As you mentioned, TCA members have been involved with us since fairly early on and have reinvested in the last number of rounds. But our goal is really to help prevent food allergies in babies. I started this company, my background as a serial entrepreneur combined with some strategic consulting experience. But I really started this company after my nephew developed a number of severe food allergies. There's a lot of clinical evidence that we could prevent most food allergies from developing by feeding small amounts of the allergenic food itself, like peanut and egg, to babies starting from a young age and doing it frequently. But most babies struggled with that process like my nephew did. And our real goal is to create products to make it easy for parents to keep these allergens in their baby's diet in ways that have been shown to prevent food allergies, because I think there's both a really great business opportunity, building a new category with some products that I think are really fantastic, customers love and are high margin, but also a really great opportunity to help a lot of babies, because if every parent could follow the new USDA and American Academy of Allergy guidelines, there'd be about 200,000 fewer babies every single year that develop severe food allergies, and very big healthcare savings for payers and insurance companies. So there's lots of really great opportunities all around to make people's lives better, as well as build an exciting new category in food allergy prevention. So thanks for having me on, but also for a number of your financial support in our mission.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for joining us tonight. And last but not the least, Charles, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. I'm Charlie O'Connell. I'm the founder and CEO of FitScript. FitScript is a company dedicated to helping empowering people living with chronic conditions through fitness. Our first product is called Glucosone. It's a clinically validated and patented fitness app for diabetes. We're really trying to pioneer the prescription of fitness apps instead of drugs for diabetes management. I'm a patient entrepreneur myself. I have type 1 diabetes. I've had type 1 diabetes for 25 years. Our customers are health plans, self-insured, employers, as well as people living around the world that we service direct to consumer through the global digital economy. And I'm really happy to be on this call. I'm calling in from New Haven, Connecticut. So it's a little later here. And I'm actually in our fitness media studio and laboratory, where we create our content and share it with the world.
Thank you, Charles. So I'm going to start the discussion with you, Charles. Right. In the past 4 years, your company, Glucosone, a tech-enabled service, has helped over 1 million type 1 and type 2 diabetes patients control their blood sugar through exercise. It's very inspiring. Could you describe the story behind your success and maybe share your motivation for starting the company?
Yeah, so like I just said, I'm a patient entrepreneur. The whole foundation of this company is based on my own personal experience. My professional background was entrepreneurship. But I will tell this story very quickly because there are several other great entrepreneurs on this call. But basically, I was diagnosed with diabetes at a kind of a strange time. I was a very successful athlete and lucky enough to be recruited to play sports in college. And then I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And just the way it worked out for me, my first experience with competitive athletics was my very first day of college football practice. And it was a total disaster. And the irony of that whole situation is I'm a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. UPenn is a really fantastic world-class institution with the finest doctors and trainers really available. The bottom line was nobody had the first clue how to help me with very basic diabetes management issues, like breakfast at 7 a.m. We're having bacon, egg, and cheese. Test your blood sugar. Your blood sugar is 250. What do you do? You know, that was before even putting the pads on. That was a very frustrating experience. At the time, I felt very frustrated, and I felt like diabetes was hindering my athletic performance. But I did persevere through it, and I love Penn. I'm a Quaker at heart, and I was telling my daughter asked me why we were called the why was my college team called the Oatmeal Eaters, which I thought was kind of funny. So Penn was a great place for me, but at the time, I really felt like my athletic opportunities had been hindered by diabetes. Fast forward many years later, I reflected, I matured, and I came to realize that it wasn't really so much that diabetes had hindered my athletics as much as athletics had helped my diabetes. And the reality was the time I felt the best, the time I had the most confidence, the time I looked the best, the time I was the most healthy was when I was athletically active. The problem for me was I had come to really fear hypoglycemia and the other negative things that can happen for people living with diabetes during exercise. And originally I started off on a personal quest. Basically, I kind of made a personal decision of I can't allow fear and anxiety to dominate my relationship with something that I love. And I just dove in. I was like, you know what? I want to learn everything about exercise and diabetes. And I started having some personal success. And when I say dive in, I mean, I really dived in for like 3 years. And what ended up happening was I went to my doctor's office. I had a diabetes checkup, and basically I had the best diabetes result that I had ever had. And at that point, I had had diabetes for about almost 15 years. And the doctor said, wow, Charlie, this is great. How did you do this? And I said, well, to be honest, I've really committed myself to fitness, and I've really figured out some things about exercise and managing my diabetes during exercise that have helped me to let go of the fear of hypoglycemia and these other really terrible issues that can happen. And the doctor said to me, that's awesome. Have you thought of helping anybody else? Because that's all anybody talks about when they come in here. And it was really at that moment that the seeds for FitScript and Glucozone were planted, because I realized it's like, wow, if I'm struggling with this and I love exercise and I'm passionate about it, what about just the regular person who wants to just get exercise because they've been told they need to get it? And the more I looked into it, I just recognized this giant hole, this clinical hole in the treatment of diabetes. Billions of dollars have been invested in the pharmaceutical aspect of diabetes. Billions of dollars have been invested in the food and nutrition part. Nothing had been invested or focused on the fitness aspect. And the irony of that, of course, was exercise is clinically recognized as the preferred therapy for type 2 diabetes. And it's also recognized as the most challenging aspect of managing type 1 diabetes. And so that was really the foundation for the concept of FitScript. The last thing I'll add is when I made this decision that I wanted to help other people, I stopped becoming depressed about my own diabetes. And that was a major motivator for me, especially in the early days of starting something in entrepreneurship, because it's hard. It's really, really hard. And what really kept me going was every time I helped somebody else, I felt better about myself, basically. And so with that, I'll share the time.
Thank you, Daniel. That's extremely inspiring, and thank you for sharing your story once again. So, thank you, Charles. And the next question is for Daniel. Ready Set Food submissions would protect babies from developing peanut, egg, and milk allergies. Extremely inspiring as well. So could you maybe talk about how you began your journey and how your allergy prevention protocol shaped the lives of many newborns today.
Sure, thank you. So I mentioned a little bit that it started this after my nephew developed severe food allergies. But it was really the experience also of being a father myself and having a lot of nieces and nephews and watching them go through the just the feeding experience, the process of trying to figure out how to introduce allergens the first time, the uncertainty, the anxiety, the worry that new parents go through. And also the difficulty in feeding babies anything. I remember the first time I was feeding my, he's now 6.5-year-old son food, I was just so excited because I felt like it was the first part of the feeding process that I could actually, really own myself. And there was just food everywhere, and like almost none of it went in his mouth. It was all on the floor and on the, cabinet. And when we saw that the clinical evidence really showed that to prevent food allergies, you had to get babies to eat multiple different allergens multiple times per week in the right dose. It just seemed not feasible based on our experience with our kids, to do that on a wide scale. So when we also saw that in the largest clinical trial, there was less than 50% compliance because it was just hard for not just us to feed all these foods to babies, but every parent to feed these foods to babies. My brother-in-law and I knew we had to do something about it. And he having now a son that has food allergies, myself being a serial entrepreneur, and then we had a friend also who is an allergist and had experience having tried to do this process herself with her own children, and even as an allergist having really struggled with it. So I think we saw a situation where in the clinical trials there was only about a 43% rate of compliance, and now every major medical guideline says that you should feed your baby these allergens starting at 4 months of age to prevent food allergies, but no one tells you how. And that we really saw a need, of course, to help drive additional education, but really to help find a way to make parents' lives easier, and that not to do something that was scientifically different than what was already proven in the clinical trials, but just to really work on how we make compliance easier, so that you can have the effect that was shown in those trials. So we really thought about just our own experience and talked to other friends with babies and thought about what's the right way to make it easy for parents to feed their baby these allergens. And it was obvious to us the only way to get babies to eat anything reliably is through a bottle. So we created a system to feed allergens to babies at first through a bottle, and then as they graduate into food and to expand the number of allergens they get exposed to, but just to make it easy for parents to follow the new medical guidelines. And I think that our real success that I think we can speak to is with over 20,000 customers. We have over 95% of them have used our product for a length of time in the clinical trials that would have been clinically effective at preventing food allergies. So I think that there's more research we need to do on our own product on different allergens, things like that. But our goal of finding a way to make it the current best practices really easy to apply for all parents is something I think we're excited to have been able to do. And now we have to be able to bring it to more parents so we can have the most impact on preventing babies from getting food allergies as possible.
Thanks so much for sharing, Daniel. And as I was chatting with you the other day, right? I mean, I kind of wish I'd known about your product just a couple of years earlier. So my relatives are suffering similar symptoms as well. So let's go to Cornell, right? The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative have been supporting the advancement of science and technology to cure preventive diseases, particularly COVID-19, right? Could you talk about the Meta project you mentioned earlier and how it connects data for groundbreaking scientific research?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned earlier, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative Foundation focuses on many problem areas in science world. And during COVID-19 crisis, this is like last March, when everything was still new, there was not too much information about the virus and the mutation and variants and stuff like that. The key thing back then was to ramp up testing abilities, and CZI, along with partnership with CZ BioHub and UCSF, turned an empty lab of UCSF into CLI a certified testing facility in just 8 days, right? So that's like science, technology, and research, everything coming together and helping the city of San Francisco. So that was one of the very important thing that we helped with. Other than that, Meta as a project, like there is a lot of research going on, and a lot of research is being published, so to speak. Like about 4,000 to 5,000 new papers are published every single day. So let's say, I'm a researcher and I'm researching on diabetes. Let's continue the theme that Charles started. Let's say I'm a researcher on diabetes, and I'm doing some research at UCSF. For me, it's practically impossible to scan through these 5,000 papers and find out like which 20, 25, 30 papers are relevant to my research area, and actually read them every single day to understand what is the latest research trend, who are the researchers, what are they researching on, what progress they've made. Can I just borrow some of these concepts and research technique and build upon each other research? That's practically impossible. So what Meta does is to connect the science by we're partnering with these publication houses, and we're getting this full text paper, and using natural language processing and other technologies, we are extracting information out of these papers, like authors, protocols, software use, methods used, particular drug, disease connection, and create a knowledge graph out of this, which is freely available. Whoever wants to sign up, you don't have to be a researcher, you don't have to be a scientist. You can go to meta.org and sign up for this, and start keeping tab on the progress that is being made in your research area. And how does it help common people is like there are a lot of rare diseases which are not being actively researched upon, and there are not too much treatment or therapies available. These rare diseases are supported through community, people who have similar disease, or family members, relatives of people suffering from rare disease. They are also benefiting. That happens to be one of our first use case, like how they can read this literature, educate themselves, and help people manage the disease better. So while other parts of CZI science focuses on core research, we focus on this part, connecting the science, and we call it graph for goodness.
Thank you so much, Cornell. That's very impressive stuff that you guys are working on. I'm gonna switch gear and go to Nicole. You started at your firm after noticing a lack of positive health and wellness coverage. Would you talk about how DPM is changing the face of fitness or health and wellness in general, and why is health and wellness PR more crucial than ever before right now?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for everybody who went ahead of me. Charles, I love what you're doing. I feel like this is a much needed topic that needs more attention, obviously. And I love what you're doing. And Daniel and Krunal, both the compliance and the allergens, that's super important. And if more people knew about this, this is exactly what we do. And then also with the information and the AI technology, Krunal, that's amazing. We started the firm in 2009. Well, I say we, but it was me. And I worked in television for 15 years, and I did notice that there was a lack of positive attention in the media. I can remember way back in the day, and I wanted to start the Positive News Minute, when I was in journalism school, and people thought I was crazy. But, there really is a lack of positive messaging out there around wellness. And I hired a coach, and she's like, you should be a publicist. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're crazy. Why would I want to do that? I love television. I love producing television. And so I ended up, going into this field with just the knowledge of me being a TV producer, and that was it. And I ended up, really having a love for wellness. I met Tony Horton through a mastermind group, and through this group, I decided that, there was a point in time where I loved the messaging. I loved everything he was doing. We were out on the street in Washington, D.C., and we were doing a press event for the National Press Club. And Tony's messaging was all around how our men and women were not fit to fight in our armed forces. And his father was a military brat. And so, we ended up taking his messaging out, and we had CNN cover it. We had Bloomberg. We had all these great, Washington, D.C. outlets take notice of Tony. And as we were leaving the workout where we were raising money for journalism, Tony said, wow, that was really amazing. And this girl walks up and she says, "You're Tony Horton. I lost 100 pounds on your, program." And to make a long story short, she had a box in her hand and she said it was her birthday, and she ended up opening the box, and his face was on the cake. And that was really my moment of like, wow, this is so cool that someone has had a transformation like this. What can we do with our clients to, help them get positive coverage for their products, their, workout stuff? And at the time we were only doing workout programs. We did a guy from The Biggest Loser. We did all kinds of different things. And then we started doing bars, weights, shakes. Then we started doing New York Times bestselling authors. And then the last 5 years, we've really been focused on bigger brands, like I said, like Side Chef and Walmart, and the collaboration that we're doing with them. I feel like, now more than ever, the consumer wants to be educated. They want to feel like they're being supported and heard, and the messaging that's being put out there is super important, that brands are actually listening to them. And, I feel like wellness is more crucial than ever with consumers. I mean, we have people reading labels, which they never used to do, investigating into what's in it, investigating into what part of the company is donating to some kind of other organization, outside of the brand. They're invested in the brand story, and the brand has to be relatable to the consumer now, and, speak directly to the consumer. So I think a lot has changed over the course of 15 years of me doing this, and us having our company in Los Angeles. But brands have now prioritized like community and, consumers, and the brands are listening. And so if you look at the brands that are listening now, you've got like Honda, they're doing ads with consumers and giving back to the consumer. Like Lincoln is a company, that makes cars, but their consumers are wellness, people. They have back massagers in the seats. They have all kinds of things to make an experience for the consumer, including a membership to Calm. So, I really feel like there's a larger sense of purpose with wellness and the brands out there. And, our purpose is to help brands get that messaging out there. And I think, for us, it's super important to be in that $4.5 trillion industry and be relatable and help our brands reach those customers that they may not be reaching on social media, that they may not be reaching doing regular advertising. So, I think we've come a long way in 15 years. And, I think wellness has grown, and it's going to continue to grow in so many great ways.
Thank you, Nicole. And speaking of transformation, we have a very transformative leader here tonight as well, Mohan. As a servant leader who has led changes in large organization and early stage startups, what is your view on the post-COVID-19 world? So what sort of structure shifts do you predict for the healthcare industry in general? What signals or like transformation anchors, as you mentioned, could help brand the new business strategies in a rapidly changing world?
I think, Christopher, I want to follow up with Nicole's point. I mean, what an amazing load of information that we just got from very heartfelt individuals. It's really clear to me that everyone on the panel has a strong purpose and a purpose greater than themselves. And that's really the fundamental element of what I believe transformation is made of, that the new form of money is meaning. And what I've seen through the years in working with Blue Cross Blue Shield, where I was the chief marketing officer, and then spending time at Cambia Health, which is a $9.8 billion organization that's all about transformation. I enjoyed and really enjoyed the work of people smarter than me. And what I saw was that when structural shifts occur in a market, COVID's an example, that the impact of that structural shift is felt through many, many years. And people who live in the cyclic behaviors of their lives, people who focus on things going up and coming back down and things going up again, are going to be victims of confusion. And the way to view the world now is trying to see through the fog of the efforts of others, which is we have to kind of find a way through COVID and discover that it's not going to be the same as it was when before COVID occurred. So the shifts that I see, and I'm not a predictor of the future. I have not been born to understand the future. I frankly haven't lived past today. So none of us are smart enough to predict. But I can see that the anchors one have to look at might be the following. One, please consider that meaning is the new money, that people are looking for greater purpose beyond their lives and are looking to serve. I mean, Charles just said it. He said it so clearly. And I think, Nicole, you said it. So others in the speaker panel just said underlyingly that they found something that visited them, that woke them up to an ideology, an idea, a product, a service, something to give to others. And what did Charles say? He started feeling better when he was serving others. That's the transformational energy that I think is coming upon us in the last, I'd say, last 10 years, but it has really fundamentally shifted the culture, the community, and the character of our society, especially in healthcare, to really focus on purpose. The other structural shift is that the new office is the home. The hub of healthcare has become the home. It was there before because the CEO of the household usually managed the financial, the health profile, and the character. But I think what's even more pronounced is that we're allowing each other to be in our own living rooms. I mean, I'm watching your living room. You have a background screen with me because I don't want you to see my living room. But the bottom line is we are visiting each other in our living rooms. And that is a major structural shift of work and health. The other is the doctor will see you now used to be the old theme. The patient will see you now is the new theme. The consumer part of health and wellness has become so dramatic that the entire institutional character is changing to adapt to that. Now, that's more of a wish than actually the truth. I'm lying to myself. I spent 17 years trying to find a way to change the lens of institutional hospitals, institutionalized insurance companies, institutionalized elements of the healthcare system to change the lens to titrate to a consumer focus. And unfortunately, I have failed. Others have failed because we still take an uptake of 4, maybe 3% uptake in any population we try to attempt to change. And anyone who gets 50% are very successful. 40% sustained, very successful. Livongo is an example of a company that came out of diabetes, and I think Charles will know of that company. We funded them a while ago under the umbrella of Cambia Health, watched them build a full loop solution. And the full loop solution was a device for the consumer, a institutional focus for insurance companies to kind of impact their numbers, and a hospital focus to enable the physician with data. If you produce full loop solutions like that, you tend to have a better chance to win than trying to follow a narrow solution with a narrow focus where the ecosystem will eat you alive. So transformational anchors, in my opinion, are the following. The home is the hub for work and health. People are living for more than just the job. They want their life to be reflective of their work, and therefore a cause greater than themselves is what people are looking for, and majority of people are asking those deeper questions. And the doctor visits you less than you visit the doctor. Does that help, Christopher, in terms of outlining what I think are a couple of anchors that one can consider transformational in the course of the future?
Absolutely, and very great insights, very much appreciated. And I think this is a good segue into our next set of questions. The next question is centered around patient advocacy, right? So I want to ask all the speakers or panelists here tonight, in your view, what role does a healthcare startup play in advancing, let's say, data privacy and value-based care? So why don't we go in reverse order? We'll start with Mohan first.
Oh, I get to answer. You're tired of me now. I just talked enough. They were just about happy I was done. They're like, okay, he's done. Let's move on to the people smarter. So you want me to say something? Okay. Data privacy, very tactical issue. And value-based design is what you brought up, right? For those who understand data privacy, this could be boring, but for those who don't, let me just try and explain it. It's the issue of protecting the data that you provide as a consumer within the healthcare system. And that data is technically yours, but it'd take you 5,000 years to get it if you really want it, because people hoard data. The institutions use data for their own understanding and perpetuation. So there's arguments everywhere about institutions saying, well, it's really your data, but fill out these forms and we'll get it to you, or et cetera, et cetera. Now, Apple Watch and other sort of devices are starting to bring the consumer into focus. And once you download it, it's yours, except it's not HIPAA protected when you download it. So it becomes yours, but almost free. $1 of data, just general data, is equivalent to $10 of healthcare data. I mean, the marketplace, the black market for data, medical data, is $10 for every dollar of normal data. So you can see how important it is to protect. But we live in an environment where the healthcare systems hoards data and silos form. Even within a large institution, which I was part of, you can't get data between the silos. So if you look at the institutional abrasions, consumers have to transport their data in so many different ways and almost ask for permission for something they technically own. But do they really own it? Well, the 21st Century CARES Act actually drove that right home and said, if you hoard, you will be punished, right? If you protect that data to the point where you don't share it, you have to create APIs. That is still in works, and they call it information blocking. And there's been a lot of noise made in that, but the organizations are still slow to adopt the theories and practices of non-information hoarding. Now, it is believed that that could actually lift the marketplace, that entrepreneurs like Charles or others like Daniel can really start to use the data and expand the horizons for the consumer. And that's the hope and dream. But we need to release these silos. We need to find a way to release the silos and give really apt value to consumers in a fashion beyond what hospitals and insurers can do. And we need to provide it at a level that's really powerful. So that's one area. The area of, and then they say that data is the new oil and all that stuff. And it's, by the way, it's hoarded, protected, and quarreled over just like oil. So it's a wonderful parallel, but we need to free that. The other is value-based design. And people are saying value-based design is the following. A physician, a hospital system negotiates with a insurance company on how they want to figure out the cost of care of a particular patient. I'm speaking in very specific terms, so allow me. And that cost of care is managed through a relationship where they say the average cost of talking to Charles, for example, engaging Charles in his diabetes, is X dollars. So we will pay that X dollars, and you will work a contract with us that says, if you go over that, you pay for it. If you go under that, you keep the money. That's a basic understanding of value-based design. I'm being very, very pronounced. I'm obviously wrong. There's more to it. But it's fundamentally a way to manage the cost so that you can work off the averages, and you don't have to do a fee for service, which is every time you see the doctor sends an information to the insurer pays based on a negotiated contract. So good story. A lot of good examples have come out about value-based design. The only two problems. One is 70% of value-based designs are actually fee for service in disguise. They got a lot of fee for service in there. So it really hasn't tested the value-based design. Second problem, where the heck is the consumer, right? It's institutionals arguing with each other, but the consumer, like Charles or Daniel or Nicole or Kunal, are not in the design. You don't know whether your doctor you visit is under a value-based arrangement where they're optimizing their costs and also optimizing your health, and their results mean something. So they actually publish your results to the insurer to make sure payments are turned on. And so the consumer is extended, but not understood. There are no standards for value-based design right now. Hopefully there will be. But those two elements block the growth and potential for moving away from a fee-for-service environment to a value-based design. Let me give an example. I go to my doctor, and by the way, I'm not incriminating any doctor. I'm just making a hypothetical. I go to my doctor and I say, I have a shoulder pain. When I do this, it hurts. When I do that, it really hurts. It's rotator cuff, right? They test you for like 10 minutes, and then they say, we need to do an MRI. right? An MRI costs about $1,000, right? Or something of that nature. Now, when you ask the doctor, what do you think it is? He or she will probably say it's a rotator cuff. You got to go do physical therapy. You do 10 sessions of that, costs $80 a session. Well, why did they not prescribe that over a rotator cuff MRI? Because they wanted to be sure it wasn't something else. Well, when I speak to my doctor, I declare, let's do the physical therapy first. And when we get that done, I'll figure out whether I want to do an MRI, because that's expensive for me, because I've got copays and I've got other things I want to pay. And by the way, in the area of payment by the consumer, in just Utah, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, the total number of dollars spent on consumers paying bills is about $390 million last year. So that's a lot of money consumers are having to spend. The argument for value-based design is, should we have it? Should we not? There's no argument. You should have it, but the consumer should be involved and the data should be shared so that actions can occur. Does that help?
That is very helpful. Thank you, Mohan. And why don't we go to Nicole? Do you have something you want to add more from a media PR's angle?
Well, I was just going to say that, it's interesting because we've had a couple of new AI technology companies come to us. I'd say during COVID, we had a lot of very varied businesses come to us during COVID. And I think that's exactly what you were talking about when you were talking about, sort of like how it can help us either improve our lives or not improve our lives. I think from a standpoint of me, because I'm dealing more with like consumer media, I would say, having access to improved medical records for me, I love that. I love it if I can go to one place and I can get everything. I think though that we struggle because of the HIPAA laws and all these other, there's another one I think that's mixed in there. But I feel like, I was managing my mother's recent medical issues with Alzheimer's. And what I found was there were so many doctors and so many things I had to do. And I'm doing this from 3,000 miles away. And it would have been easier if I just had one portal that I could go to, that I could log into, that I could get access to or give access to a multiple of doctors. So I think where the technology is headed in that direction. It's just getting around these, the complete picture of that. I do believe that AI tech can really help. I mean, I had one company come to me that does AI technology for employers where they can calculate like what's going to happen with such and such employee. If they've got these things wrong with them, then you're going to have these added costs into your budget of, for having employees. Well, I thought that was cool technology. So I like where it's going. I think we do have a lot of work to go to get to that place where it's safe, because I think, the data abuse that's out there is rampant. And I know coming from the PR industry that everyone loves to arm themselves with the data because that gives you more to work with, especially if you're going to a media outlet and you have this technology and you can say, well, we, did a survey of all of these employers that bought our program and had such and such results, and they were able to reduce their costs by a certain amount of money. So I get where that's going and I see that. I mean, I like it. I do like it. I just feel like I don't have enough knowledge around, the patient advocacy. And I do have enough to say that like, as a patient, I would welcome the technology. I know there's another company, it's called My Purple Folder. And I was reading about them, I think yesterday in a Wall Street Journal article, like having access into one folder would be amazing. And so if I had that, when my mom was ill, it probably would have helped me so much more.
Thanks for sharing, Nicole. I'm going to go to Kunal.
Yeah, I think wonderful points presented by Mohan and Nicole. Just to build upon what they talked, I do believe there's need for patients and people owning their own medical records and data. And technologies like blockchain can be really useful here, which you can create a smart contract and your entire medical history is in a blockchain and you give consent to a doctor to access your record when you're in the office. Things like that. There needs to be, like Mohan was mentioning, patient is nowhere in the picture. So this needs to be designed keeping patient in center, and there has to be some regulation around that. About value-based care, I totally understand. There's a concept in insurance called usage-based insurance. Like it's sort of like your driving pattern, your braking pattern, and everything. Consider your vehicle history, everything, and then you are given a premium, and that changes time to time basis. Rather than here's the contract for next 6 months, and you keep paying this. Doesn't matter you're a good driver or bad driver, kind of thing. Similarly. I think there is a lot of scope of introducing similar concept in healthcare, and incentivizing people like, hey, you worked out with Charles today, and you did so many minutes of exercise regularly, and then you did some mindfulness activities. Here's the rebate on your insurance premium, right? Those kind of things. So incentivizing people, I think there should be a new trend around that. So prevention is better than cure. Yeah.
Thank you, Cornell. Yeah. Daniel, what do you think as a startup founder and CEO?
I think there's a couple different issues. One is that the incentives are, I think, still not, even once we get to a world of potentially like value-based care for the payers, still have, really some incorrect incentives on the the side of the people doing innovation. And I'll just give you an example. I think like one of the things we were really thinking about when we started our company is, whether to look at our product more as a medical food supplement or as a drug. And I think that there's an opportunity for much better, more clear path towards reimbursement at a much higher rate if it's a drug. There's much more acceptance from certain payers if it's a drug. But when you look at a product that really just helps feed babies food, and that could be done much less expensively for everyone, it's just much better for society, for the healthcare system, not for that to be a drug. And that you've seen certain other products in like the food allergy arena, take a drug route. There's a drug, for example, on the market now that costs $1,000 a month for basically a small amount of peanut powder and a pill that the patient has to then break open and eat in the doctor's office. And that's expensive because they spent a lot of money on clinical trials to get it done. So I feel like there's still needs to be a lot more thought around like, how do we encourage the right types of, even if you're getting at the right types of innovation, how do we encourage it in a way that's a win-win for society and not just trying to kind of maximize reimbursement levels, even if that extends, launch date by 4 years and drives up development costs by hundreds of millions of dollars. So, and I think for us, like, because we were able to find a direct-to-consumer route to help develop the category while we work on, building more direct research on our product, there are other areas, but I think that there's probably a lot of areas that don't get explored because you really can't get anywhere without a clinical trial, which has some benefit, but also dramatically drives up the cost for anyone doing any kind of innovation there. And that, I think that it's a shame because I do think startups are really well equipped to really help look at how we deliver better value, because we exist because someone sees an opportunity to help save money or deliver something better value. And if we can better equip people to be able to address those problems directly without as much of these initial expenses, I think we'll have not just better results for innovation, but also less costly implementations once you get to that point.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm gonna go over to Charles. Charles, what do you think?
Sure. Well, I think I might have a little bit of a different point of view. My kind of take on data and healthcare is that the point and value of data is to the patient themselves, and that we are just the tip of the iceberg of the ability to use data for precision therapy and medicine. And that the reality is that the value of data for Mohan, you mentioned the 10-to-1 ratio, which I think we're all still under the influence of like ad-based revenue, basically, and like the companies of 2010 making incredible money by gathering data on what people search and look at. Where we are coming from is we provide content as therapy based on biometrics. And we do that by harnessing data. We know that the future of medicine and healthcare is extreme precision therapy based on a comprehensive set of data that gives the patient exactly what they need at exactly the right time, and then avoids, in many cases, years of either unnecessary or detrimental other therapies that are kind of blunt instruments, because they're not precise. And the only way that you can have precision is through data. In our case, what we do is we do exercise therapy based on real-time blood sugar levels. What that means is if your blood sugar level is 200, you fundamentally need a different therapy than if your blood sugar level is 100. That is like the most caveman version of precision medicine, and yet is profoundly effective. It literally halts the progression of diabetes by just actually taking the real-time information. So when the conversation of data in healthcare comes up, I really think about the patient. The value of the data is for the patient. It's not for the entity or business that wants to sell something to the patient. Of course, that's the next step. Something that we're pioneering is products facilitated based on biometric information. So instead of, the way that Google works right now is it's all based on what you search. We think that we can offer a better way to facilitate more relevant products based on their biometrics. It's actually something that they don't know. Most people who have a healthcare issue, it's because they don't know what to do. So relying on their ability to search about what do I do is fundamentally going to not be as effective as if you had the actual biometric information. The second thing is we have really benefited from the democratization of healthcare data through things like the Apple Fire protocols, which has been incredibly beneficial for us. There's no way, we're a tiny little company, there's no way that we could negotiate on a one-off basis with all the different EMRs that are out there to have some sort of relationship. What Apple has done to effectively enable us as a tiny healthcare company through standard APIs to have our consumers and our patients say, yes, share my data, and then you just hit a button, that is powerful. That is how little companies like FitScript or whatever can now really work directly with patients. And so those are kind of, I don't know, those are my thoughts when it comes to you're talking about data and healthcare.
Thanks a lot, Charles, for sharing. And moving forward, I'm going to combine the next two questions and ask them together, right? So as we slowly open the economy and transit into the new normal, what is the future of health tech in a post-pandemic world, right? And as a follow-up question, how do we identify the right technology for improving consumers or patients' experience and satisfaction? So I'm going to go around and let's go to Mohan. What do you think?
Well, thank you, Charles. Thank you very much for that counterpoint of view. Actually, we're not really countered. I truly believe that information in the hands of the consumer is what really makes the difference. And I have actually fought for that for over 17 years inside institutions. What I've discovered, however, is that the institutional data is not just used to sell. And my 1-to-10 ratio was not an issue of selling data. It was really about what the black market believes is valuable. And what is really interesting is how much people believe medical data is so valuable for understanding consumers. And I think that's what makes people hoard it. So what we need to do is exactly what you said, release that data. Now, in answering, at least attempting to answer your question, Christopher, about as the economy opens up, what's going to happen in the market. And again, in a post-pandemic world, I believe that technology is obviously the accelerator, but I think business models are also very important. I've seen many high-tech companies come in and talk about solving a problem, and they solve it well. And I launched 5 in 10 years. In the last 10 years, I launched 5 separate startups. One was on transparency. 10 10 years ago, I launched a company called HealthSpark that just got acquired. In that company, we thought giving data to consumers, providing them which were the better hospitals in terms of data, providing what the costs were, was going to change the world. Well, in 10 years, it didn't change the world. What happened was consumers didn't look at that data when they were engaging physicians. They engaged the physician, and the physician said something, and they responded. Because consumers are not analytic generally. They're usually reactive. So when they have an illness, they go to the doctor, and then they react. How do you get consumers to engage at a much more longitudinal way, engage ahead of time? And that's what's so interesting with Daniel's technology and solutions is people know that you have to think ahead about the allergy and sort of train your kid about the allergy and use food as medicine and not make it, as you said so clearly, a clinically trialed, acceptable packet you eat in front of the doctor, right? Make it a way of lifestyle and habit and make that commercially viable so that people can actually afford it. I think that's a beautiful opening. But I would suggest to Daniel that he has to create an open, a full loop solution. He can't just talk about food as medicine. He has to create a campaign around it. And that's where people like Nicole actually can, she says, well, I'm not sure I understand it, but she's a super brain when it comes to be able to get consumers to understand value, because most of the time we're talking over their heads and we're talking institutional language. So there is great deal of value in this panel, particularly if you just took this panel and used it to appreciate any particular technology we want to inject. It would be a business model that really works, right? That actually generates money and has a flywheel. It would be a media company that essentially knows how to get to consumers and allows those consumers to appreciate the value that they're paying for and to actually get them to pay for it. Because a lot of times, startups that come to me and engage immediately pivot when they discover consumers don't buy. And they run off to insurance companies or they run off to hospitals because that's where the money is. And then they change their perspective completely and move away from the consumer into making the institution happy about what they're building versus getting to the consumer. And that fundamentally is what Daniel's going to be challenged with and Charles is going to be challenged with as they grow their companies. They will have to pivot to know where the money is made and how do you get consumer dollars as well as institutional dollars, how to balance the two. So I would suggest that the new tech is the new business model. It's finding a full loop business model that truly allows the media to touch the consumer, the institutional value proposition, and then the actual consumer succeeding with a flywheel that is more than just 5 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, because you got to get to a scale that really has impact, which a lot of these startups want and start to do. And also, with the world remote, there's a paradox. People want remote care, but they also want real care. They want intimate care. So being the technology that allows to take intimacy into technology in an effective way. And frankly, this is not intimate. I wish I was in LA hanging out with all of you and having a drink afterwards and having a chat. It's not going to be the same doing this way. Yeah. But the person that can master delivering care and receiving care using technology would be the breakthrough scenario. The other is I would advise startups to find things that are meaningful, things that had tyranny built in them. I use the word with a small t, but tyranny built into them. It's like, this is just wrong. Like what Daniel said and what Charles said, this is wrong, right? You're missing something. And that's what fuels people now. It fuels companies, it fuels the character of startups, and it brings a different form of energy than just saying, I analyze this market and look at an opportunity and I found it, right? That doesn't seem to be the way out of this pandemic. I think that the way out of this pandemic is fundamentally focused on generating the kind of identifying reason to do what you're doing. And both Daniel and Charles and Kunal and Nicole all have those identifying elements. And I hope those are examples so that's why I admire this panel significantly, even though we've never met, but I can clearly see that it's curated well. Does that help, Christopher?
Of course, it's very, very helpful. Yeah. Thank you, Mohan. And let us go to Nicole. Would you like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I was going to say, Mohan, I totally agree with you when you're talking about like being able to talk to the consumer in a way that they're going to understand. There's a lot of businesses that come to us and it's very complicated and they think that, oh my gosh, the consumer's just going to understand this and the media is going to understand it. But what we do is we actually break it down so that then the consumer and the media will understand it, because you have to speak in layman's terms and you have to speak in simplified version of your data and what you're putting out and your AI and everything. So I think that that's super important for brands to remember that, you know, when you set out with your startup and you want to get attention for your brand, PR is a great way to do that. If you can find an agency that specializes in something that you do, whether that's healthcare, whether that's technology, they'll help you break down that messaging so that that messaging goes out in a way that people will understand sort of, you know, what you're putting out there. I mean, the only thing that I would say that I could add to this particular question is really, you know, what's the new normal? What's the future? I do see like I said before, the AI technology, I feel like that's going to be really big. Data sharing is huge. I mean, my only concern is as a consumer is like, how much of my information is getting shared and is it too much and isn't it invasion of privacy? So from a consumer standpoint, and I'd love to see more machine learning, like where machines can actually, you know, calculate and do the data for us, to give us some concrete stuff that we can then take out and push out to a media source, for you know, just more coverage.
Yep, absolutely. And we do have the right expert on the panel as well, right? Kuno has got like many years of engineering experience and background. We'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, definitely. I think technology has evolved. What needs to be done now is to marry technology with compliances and the complexity of medical sciences. The new trend that I would see here is more of a preventive and prescriptive, which is like, how do you stop the disease before it happens? What are the signals that you picked up through wearable technologies? Like, is it your blood glucose monitors, your blood pressure monitors, everything super compact, combined in an Apple way, which is, you know, very good to wear as a designer brand as well, but it works with high precision, and also privacy is, you know, everything that Apple does. So how things are invented that can capture things in real time, translate, and give some prescriptive insights to the user, like what should you be doing to control this kind of thing to avoid something in future. I definitely see a big trend over there. One more thing that I see, not directly consumer facing, but it is, you know, business facing, which is this whole clinical trial process. It's generally like 7 to 10 years long process before a drug comes to the market. What we have seen in last 12 months is there are a few vaccines which got emergency approval from FDA, and a lot of us are vaccinated. Is there an opportunity here that this whole process can be optimized, fine-tuned, and accelerated? So the sites and CROs and pharmas and scientists and, you know, bioinformaticians are freed from one cycle and they focus on other. There are a lot of disease today which don't have any medicine. There is just way to manage it somehow. So if, you know, there's a learning that we can apply from this thing in future, there will be one more trend that I would assume pharma companies and CROs are looking at.
Thanks a lot for sharing, Kuno. We're going to go to Daniel next.
So yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what's been said, especially Kunal and Mohan. I think that your perspective on like implementation is really key. But that especially what we see in food allergy prevention is that there's just so many levels of the complexity of implementation, whether it's, you know, pediatricians, even, for example, there was a survey of pediatricians, and 3 years after their own medical guidelines were saying that they should all be talking to parents about preventing food allergies. On a self-reported basis, only 30% of them said they were. So I think you have like a bandwidth problem, you have like a complexity problem, like a, and just getting people to focus and pay attention long enough to tell them what you want to tell them, kind of problem. So I think that that's I think where we see, I think, a lot of opportunity is that there are a lot of like hard answers still to be solved out there, but there's a lot of answers that we know the solution to, but that it's hard to get people to actually follow the right advice that we all kind of know and accept as the right thing to do. So I think some of it is finding easier ways for people to do it, which is one of the things that we're focused on, and also helping facilitate better education, which is the other component of what we do. Like we work with healthcare systems to provide them with educational tools that are non-branded to give to their patients and things like that. So I think that you have to be creative to solve the kind of bandwidth problem, and the real problem that I don't know how we solve is that it's a zero-sum game with people's attention. So at some point, if you're squeezing in too many different things they have to worry about, they're just going to not be paying attention to something else you need them to focus on. So I do think that that's a problem that we think about when we're looking at like how do we really grow awareness. It's not just like us that are growing awareness in a vacuum, but there's so many things that compete for people's attention these days, and especially when it's something kind of scientific, that it just makes it less likely that people want to engage with it. That just means we have to make it more compelling for them to want to do so, to get them over the hump. So there's no silver bullets, but I think that's something that's always on our mind, how we get that sufficient level of excitement to produce the engagement to get the awareness to really penetrate the right way.
Thanks so much for sharing, Daniel. Vas, why don't we go to Charles?
Sure. So I agree with everything that's been said so far. I'll maybe just contribute three things. The first thing immediately I think is a super exciting opportunity is the phone itself being the hub of healthcare. And there's going to be an explosion of diagnostic tools that connect to your phone and have algorithms that can diagnose your issue way faster, better, easier than somebody going to see a doctor in the office. And everything from like self MRIs to like I saw this incredible demo of a guy who plugged in a MRI machine into his phone that he was built for pregnant women, where they could actually see their baby in their belly. And the app then did a complete diagnostic on the imagery. That is I think, the next frontier of home healthcare. And I think that is going to be an incredibly exciting technological boom and is basically going to drive the economy for the next 25 years. The challenges that I see are, Mohan, I appreciate what you said about getting the right business model, because a big problem for health tech companies, we have experienced this, is almost all health tech companies have built a business model on servicing employer health plans and specifically focusing on the Fortune 500 health plans. The problem with that is that in a lot of cases, with most of the diseases that we're talking about, the people that work at the Fortune 500 companies are not really the people that have the issues. So the patient population that really would benefit the most from healthcare technology right now is kind of on the outside looking in. And that's a really hard problem because of the kind of pressure and the examples you mentioned, Mohan, and Livongo is amazing. Livongo is an amazing company. It's a hard act to follow. And for any company. The third thing that I'll throw out there is I do think that ultimately America has an opportunity to export healthcare. I think that healthcare is one of the actual fundamental things that America has an expertise and a competitive advantage in the world. We have to figure out a way how to export healthcare through the global digital economy. It's obviously the future of trade. It's obviously the future of how we are going to have commerce. And as the world comes online, and I hate to say it, we're not going back. America is not going back to making hot dogs. Okay, it's just not, and other kind of things that can be replicated in countries that are second and third world. But what we do have is an incredible healthcare knowledge base and infrastructure. And like for us, being in New Haven, which is not usually considered, like New Haven is definitely never confused with Silicon Valley, but in New Haven's case, there is a knowledge base of incredible healthcare minds. And figuring out a way to export that knowledge through technology to help people, whether they're in Connecticut, whether they're in Dallas, whether they're in Mexico City, whether they're in India. In our case, our second biggest customer population is in India. And we're just scratching the surface. We're not even doing anything to get those customers. They're finding us. So, I think that's the challenge. It's both exciting, but definitely has not been figured out. There hasn't been a path laid out to the global opportunity of healthcare that I think ultimately is going to be what the next 50 years is going to be about in terms of healthcare as a business.
Thanks, Charles. So the next question is a bit heavier. So recently we've seen a major nationwide social reckoning concerning systemic racism, right? As leaders, what can we do to reduce health disparities? How do we improve healthcare access for everyone and ensure certain groups or populations are not left behind? So, I mean, we got about 15 minutes. This could potentially be our final question. We want to be able to wrap up before 7:30. Why don't we start with Mohan first on this question?
It's a very troubling situation when you discover that when a African-American patient has a 30% lower possibility of surviving heart disease than a non-African-American patient. And we see statistics that indicate that if you have a doctor of the same race, that you have a better chance for care. And that sort of brings up an interesting set of data points. And I can name a series of other data points that shockingly realize that we haven't touched certain underserved communities, and they have certain biases against medical treatment in the way they're being treated. I'm an Edmund Hillary Fellow for New Zealand, and they have similar challenges in terms of cultural diversity and the lack of support for underserved communities. And I remember talking to a Maori gentleman who was a chief, who said, you want me to trust your doctor, but you killed my healers when you took over my life centuries prior. So it's an interesting dimension that we think of care in a particular narrow way, and we expect care to be adjusted to by all the races that we and cultures we're dealing with. And that's not always the case. There are many conciliaries, many other techniques. There's natural medicine solutions. There's many other solutions that appeal to different audiences, not divided by race, actually, divided by ethnicity and background. So I think the number one thing to consider is your data right for your patient? When physicians treat patients who are multicultural, the pills they prescribe, the services they provide may not be appropriate because the testing was done with particular biases. And the data that they're using has also biases or lack of the distribution that we are expecting to receive. So the number one thing I think health insurers are doing and hospitals are doing is a data introspection. They're looking at their data and asking themselves, is the data built in with bias already? And should we use that kind of data? And how do we unbias that data? Now, Kunal and other people who are AI experts probably worrying about these sort of challenges. How do you strip out the bias in the programming and the bias in the data so that you can make it much more equanimous? That's number one. Number two is the health disparities are about access, about assessment, and about delivery. So there are three areas, which is how do you give all communities access that allows communities to accept the offer of other communities, the same access to that? And how do you give them the same assessment capability. Similar, but same, but slightly different depending on the biases that are, and I mean biases in a positive way. And then delivery, which is how do you deliver care the right way for underserved communities? I work with a lot of health clinics that are in the underserved communities. And I had the pleasure of, and the suffering of watching what it's like, right, to do vaccinations, right? Just that alone, right? How do you get enough funding to vaccinate all the people when you don't have enough staff? You're in a small clinic, out in the rural part of America. And how do you open up your EMR, for example? Well, they can't afford an EMR. They are so small, so they get a group deal on the EMR, and the EMR has a deal that doesn't open the data up. So they don't have a way to get to the data to update that they have given a vaccination to a person. Think about that. They can't update it. They have to do it by hand. So when they vaccinate, they have to go and do it by hand. So now what do? They spend money on robotic process automation. They do, instead of getting to the data directly, which they should have the right to do, but that's not happening, they have to go through the front end. So what do? They hire programmers to emulate a human being putting the data in so that they can get that in there. That's ridiculous. That is just beyond my ability to even conceive of reality. Like, it's a cartoon. I mean, it should be a TV show, Nicole. It's like, what are people doing, right? Why is data so hoarded? Why is it so collected? Why is it so controlled? And the underserved communities and the underserved clinics that actually are about access are also suffering. And more funding is going to help, but more different business models about how to get to that community is really clear. So I say systemic racism is too big of a topic to deal without talking to each other in person, nor is it a small enough topic not to address. It is a huge topic. And in healthiest way, it is most disparate because it's people's lives and it's the way people are being treated, consciously or unconsciously. It is a dangerous situation for health delivery for our country. And if we don't get deep into the data and help our physicians who want to serve, who want to get close to the patient, but they only spend 15 minutes with the patient. The rest of the time, they're dealing with community systemic racism. So how do you deal with that, right? And does that have a health impact? I can guarantee you that racism has impact on health, just like any other form of abuse has health impact, intentional or otherwise. So I think we've got a long road ahead of us. Now, before I sound like a complete, attitude with legs, I don't mean to come across that way. I want to say this because I really feel it. I came to this country with $800, 40 years ago, and I got an opportunity of a lifetime. So I know that this country is a great country. And I don't think we should label each other. What we ought to do is look at the problem and solve it, which is get more diverse data. Diversity is good. Let's get data that allows people to help people. Let's get better access in an articulate, self-sustaining way. Let's not just fund it and then say it's one shot. Let's find a way to sustain it so that societies can come to us in the medical system with the trust and the value that we are treating them as an N of one, not an N of many. And racism can draw itself as N of many, right? They can group you into a culture, Christopher, and group me into a culture. And that's not how I want to be treated. Neither do you want to be. I don't want to be a population. I want to be treated as an individual with population data, but I don't want to be a population in healthcare.
I appreciate
I hope that helps. I hope I didn't insult anybody by the commentary.
No, yeah. We're gonna go to Nicole next.
You picked the girl that doesn't have a lot to say in this area. I mean, I think I agree. I agree with everything that Mohan is saying. I do recognize what he's saying, and I do believe that as more businesses sort of adopt the ideals of social responsibility to meet the appetite of the consumers, the brands are going to understand the consumers better. And I do see where racism is playing into exactly what you were talking about. We have an expert, Asian American, wrote a book. I think I have it here, Thrive State. And he did a segment that was picked up by a San Francisco, can't remember the outlet in San Francisco, but he talked all about how Asian hate affects your mind, body, spirit. And I do believe that, you know, if we can read into more of this and how our actions affect our health and affect the outcome of our health, I do believe that, you know, people will be they'll be healthier, they'll be better. I mean, but then again, we always have the other side of, you know, the social movement and you know, things playing into the social movements. And you know, we had a lot of stress this last year. We had Black Lives Matters, we had the election, we had you know, all of these things really, and coronavirus, being locked in our homes for, you know, a year and 3 months. I think all of those things play into you know, play into this.
Thanks, Nicole. Kunal, I think you probably have a lot to say on this particular topic.
Yeah, I have a lot to say, but I'll leave some time for Charles and Daniel. I think I'll tie 2 points here. Number one is what Mohan was alluding to, which is education for patient community, underserved patient community, how they can talk better about their illness and how can they seek better treatment. Second thing is using power of technology. Technology is like a weapon. You can use that to protect yourself, or you can use that to hurt others. In this case, we need to use that to protect ourselves, kind of use case. And AI is heavily dependent on the data that you use to train the models. So it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? So a carefully curated training data set used for machine learning models can actually help to solve and remove this racial bias from the system. There's a paper published in this January in Nature Medicine about how to leverage AI for analyzing X-rays and CT scans and others, not just to say what doctor is going to tell you after looking at you, but to say what patient was going to tell you, right? So let's say 2 patients from different races come with pain in the knee. And depending on the race, there are areas of your knee which can be hurt. And if you ask standard questions, like on a scale of 1 to 10, if I press here, how much it hurts, and it doesn't hurt much, then that's it. Instead of that, looking at who you are and getting that kind of AI-based treatment done, and you know, there's a lot of scope of removing this parity from the system. And like Charles said, it also ties to the precision medicine, right? Like who you are, where you come from, and the treatment and diagnostic process is tailored to that, and technology can certainly enable that.
Thanks so much, Kunal. Daniel.
I think from our perspective, you know, one of the big things we think about a lot is that in lower income communities, there's actually a higher cost for parents that have a food allergy. So even outside of the incidence of food allergies, because there's fewer purchases of EpiPens, fewer purchases of specialty foods, there's a higher incidence of food allergic reactions, and about $1,000 of annual cost for families that are lower income, compared to higher income families end up with about a $400 per year cost for managing food allergies. So I think there's like a really big component, even just specific to food allergy and food allergy management. So I think from our perspective, you know, we try and do what we can as a small business with the, you know, ability to donate some of our products. So we have a donation program to anyone on SNAP or Medicaid that can come and claim a free subscription to our product. You know, I think that we're excited to have partnered with Nurse Family Partnerships, which is a group that delivers advice and help to lower income families every 2 weeks, pre and post birth. So I think that there's a lot of great opportunities for us to work with, you know, to the extent that our budget as a small business allows, you know, helping, you know, lower income families address the same problems that we're selling products to higher income families for. So, you know, I think that it's not always a great fit for every business, but that for us, there's a great opportunity to do that. And partially because we have you know, enough margin to give away some for free, and also some donors that have family members with food allergies that help support it also. think we have a good opportunity to more directly help address some of the lower income areas, and also look at how we can get eventual reimbursement by Medicaid or similar groups, because there is really positive ROI in preventing food allergies. But I think that's a long road, and that in the near term we can find ways to more directly address it just with the tools that we've built for the products that we sell.
Thanks a lot for sharing, Daniel. Charles, would love to get your thoughts on this.
Sure. So these are big questions, Christopher. I would, I'll keep it very narrow focused. For me and for us, we think, this is about trust, and technology can enable, I guess the word that I'm trying to say is franchising. With technology, you can equip people who may not have the degree or the experience to offer a healthcare service 10 years ago. But with technology and all the things we've been talking about, that person can actually be equipped to offer a service, and actually a highly reliable service. And all of these issues about that we're talking about, social inequality, et cetera, all fundamentally come down to trust. And people trust people that they know. And if you can equip members of a community to be able to offer a service through technology that really is through their phone at this point, that is a way to get healthcare services out into a community in a way that was not possible 10 years ago. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you did have to go through 6 or 7 or 10 years of schooling to offer certain healthcare services. Now with technology, that can be sped up and accomplished in a matter of weeks or months of training. And then that person can then go into a community where infrastructure already exists and be equipped to offer a healthcare that basically is not being received. So, without going into giant issues, I think that that's a specific targeted way where healthcare technology can help address some of these inequality issues.
Thanks very much for sharing, Charles. So I know we're about time. So I'm incredibly grateful to be joined by such an amazing group of panelists tonight. I want to thank you for your time and expertise. Very much appreciated. And I know we've gone over by a couple of minutes now. I want to thank again everyone for the participation. And please stay tuned for our upcoming digital marketing panel on May 25th and the cryptocurrency panel on June 8th. I'll be hosting that panel discussion as well. This concludes our discussion tonight, and wish everyone have a great evening. Bye for now. Thanks all. Thank you for attending. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to meet all of you.